Okay, so I have some things to say about this one. So this one is from November 8th, 2013. And if you remember way back towards the beginning when I introduced the Monster Hunter emblems, this one again is the Nargacuga. And like I mentioned, it's my favorite monster from the series. But this one is the very first of the Monster Hunter circular emblems. And if you've managed to find my work here on YouTube or on DeviantArt or on the Monster Hunter subreddit, you've probably seen me posting these circular emblems at the beginning of each month. This started probably some point in 2013. I don't know if the date on this one is the exact date it was drawn, but it would have been around then. But this was the start of that series, and it's sort of what I've become known for. I don't want to say famous, but as I've posted things from Monster Hunter all over the place and different sources, primarily it's these circular emblems. And unlike the front or side faces, as the name would suggest, these are meant to be more full body renderings of the creatures in a somewhat circular format. I have had some people call me out in some of these because they're not completely circular, just like this one, but it's really more of a format choice than a strict requirement. But this is where a lot of that started, and I know this design has been fairly popular. I know people have told me that they like this one because Nargacuga is pretty popular anyway, but this one's special just because this is where that whole series started, and I think I've got at least a few more in the collection here to sort of look at and see how things change. Case in point, so I showed you guys the Devil Joe face way back near the beginning. This is the circular emblem for Devil Joe. So, like I mentioned before, it's a big, almost T-Rex looking hungry dinosaur, and its body is fairly long and it's got a really long tail. And so this one is probably the most literal interpretation of a circular emblem, and that it's pretty much just a straight circle. But I wanted to try and convey the whole spiky aspect of it, and also get that its face, which is this one looks a lot more like the actual Devil Joe than just the face render, because you can see its jaws. It's got all of these chin spikes in addition to tons of teeth, and its body has all of these red-orange veins, and when it gets upset, it sort of pumps up, and then all of the veins start glowing red, and it gets really angry. This particular one is a lot more simple than some of the other circular emblems that I've done, but I feel like it captures the angry pickle pretty well, so I was pretty pleased with how this one turned out. This next one from 11/11/2013. This one is also a Monster Hunter circular emblem, and this is the monster that debuted in Monster Hunter 4. And this is the Gore Magala, the flagship for Monster Hunter 4. And this thing is an unclassified wyvern. It's got wings. It looks like a dragon, but it's jet black. It's got this tough shell and these big wings that are sort of folded up on its body like a cape. And it actually doesn't have eyes. It has these horns right here that are actually folded up against its head normally. And when you tick it off, it gets enraged. The horns flip out, and it has these purple glowing patterns where its eyes would be that are sort of like sensors that allow it to see. And this thing is a very, very iconic monster. And from what I gather, it's pretty popular too. This one seems to be a favorite for people online. I remember I did this one for the launch of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, which is the one we got here in the West. The original Monster Hunter 4 was Japan only, and then its expansion 4G, or 4 Ultimate here, is what we got. And Gore Magala was not the flagship in that one, but it was on the cover. So I believe the box art that we got in the West featured this monster, and I really liked it. I remember fighting in the demo, and I thought, I need to find a way to represent this thing because it's pretty awesome. So this is a pretty good result. I'm happy with the way it turned out, and people seem to dig it too, so that's cool. Okay, so still keeping with the Monster Hunter theme, we're back to the side renders of the faces. This one is the Green Plesioth. And anyone is familiar with the Monster Hunter series, this one's from June 13th, 2014. Anyone who's been playing Monster Hunter Wilds has probably heard of Plesioth, either through experiencing it in-game or just hearing people complain about it. This thing is like a giant fish wyvern. It looks sort of like a bipedal shark with wings, and it lives in the water and it can flop around on land amphibiously. This monster is notorious for having busted hitboxes in the older games. You might hear people reference the hip check, which was a move that it could do on land, and it got this sort of notoriety because its hitbox was very, very liberal, and it could be quite far away from you in-game, and if it would just thrust its hip at you from what seemed like a safe distance, you would get hit by it and go flying. It sort of became the scourge of the earlier Monster Hunter games. I admit that it's the regular Plesioth and its green variant are kind of obnoxious, but I do like their designs. I do like their concepts. I feel like Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, which let you fight it in the water, sort of gave the fight a bit more depth. I personally like the monster. I don't like fighting it. And getting a chance to draw its face and sort of relive the frustration was kind of amusing. Okay, so this next one from July 6, 2014. I think we got a couple more of Monster Hunter related designs from this particular year. This is the Akantor. The Akantor circular emblem was one of the ones that I drew kind of around the time of the other ones. In-game, the Akantor is this massive, technically it's classified as a wyvern. It's a massive quadrupedal monster with these huge tusks on its lower jaw. You fight it in a volcanic field, and it basically attacks you by burrowing under lava and trying to surprise you from underneath. When it's above ground, it'll try and run you over, or if it's really upset, it'll try and blast you with a sonic roar. It's like a wind tunnel of force that can just sweep across the battlefield. Akantor is a late game target, and for those that are a little unprepared, it can be kind of a tough fight. I had drawn the face versions of this one way before the circular, but I wanted to do this version of it to sort of capture this angry volcanic creature that I enjoyed fighting in the games. And I think the overall dark sort of burnt color scheme and then the orange highlights for the volcanic parts works pretty well. Overall, pretty interesting monster, and I'm glad I got a chance to draw it. Okay, I know why I picked this one. So I know I've been doing a lot of Monster Hunter emblems, but I think between 2013 and 15 I drew a lot of them. This one is from July 11th, 2015, so we're skipping ahead, getting pretty close to current date actually. This particular monster from the Monster Hunter series is Ukanlos, and Ukanlos is the counterpart to Akantor in that this monster is very similar in design and style, but you fight it in the frozen Arctic region, and so it's like the ice version of Akantor. Its moves are really similar. It attacks by burrowing, and it can sort of Jaws style swim through the ice and try and run you down, or it'll fling giant chunks of the ice blocks at you, or just shoot you with the freezing beam. Again, it's a fight that I do enjoy. It's shown up in most of the games recently. I do like how, compared to the previous one, this one lends itself to a circular theme a bit better. I think I tried to make that consistent when I was drawing this one, just to sort of adhere to the requirements of a quote-unquote circular shape. So between the color and the shape, I do like the way this one turned out. Okay, so we are taking a break from Monster Hunter, and this one's from October 7th, 2015. This one is called Scarlet Seer, and this design is pretty simple. There's not much to it. It's meant to be sort of an alien, otherworldly design with some red and black color scheme. But this one is significant because this design was the very first speed drawing video I did on YouTube, I believe. I have to go back and look at the archives, but if I remember correctly, when I decided to start editing video capture of me drawing these things and then speeding it up, I believe this was the very first one I ever did. And it was a relatively short video. Probably was only a couple minutes, but kind of kicked off the whole speed drawing series that now I've been posting pretty consistently. So, while the design itself is not that fancy, it sort of kicked off a lot of what I've been doing on YouTube, so I think it's worth mentioning. Okay, so this next one from October 13th, 2015. This one is the face emblem for Ardelius, which was the Faceless Summoner papier-mâché project that I started. I guess this would have been in 2015. That's hard to believe it's been that long. But as you can see from some of the older videos on the channel and on our site, I started working on this character and this universe of lore based around these different characters, and the whole Faceless Summoner series revolved around this main character and then all the different creatures that it fights and sort of absorbs. In addition to the actual papier-mâché pieces, which I won't really go into here, I designed emblems for each of the creatures in there, so this was the one for the main character. I can't remember if I included any of the other ones in the collection. I guess we can jump forward and see. This was 10/13/2015. Guess not. They may show up later, but I basically did emblems for all of them, and I featured them in the actual concept videos. It was kind of fun to do. It's a project that's ongoing, so I know I'll be adding to that one at some point soon. Okay, so this next one is from November 6, 2015, and this is one of the first posted entries in the Elemental Sundial design series. And that's not one I work on super frequently just because they tend to be kind of complex to work on. But the whole genesis of the project was inspired by those old carved Aztec sundial design. Basically, what I've done is taken a face type shape, either one that's more organic or one's more even mechanical, and then I create the boundary enclosed part around it, and then I put the elements around it on as well. The primary ones like fire, earth, water, wind, and the sort of unofficial secondary elements would be like ice, light, shadow, lightning. And the whole thing is just like this elemental contrast, and these tend to be rather busy, but I do like working on them from time to time just because they're an interesting challenge to, one, come up with different ideas and also just kind of see what develops, just like all the other free drawing type stuff I do. So this one, the Divine Seraphos, is one of the first. I think this was the first one I posted. I had been tinkering around with the design for a while before I decided to convert it into speed drawings. So this next one is from November 14th, 2015, and this is one of the first examples from the Armada sort of spin-off series that I called the Hybrid Fusion series of designs. I did a drawing commentary on one that was an example of this, but basically, whereas the regular Armada designs are single layer, in that there's one flat layer of designs, the Hybrid Fusion combines two different layers. So I draw the main layer and I draw the accompanying part, which I call the array, separately, and then when I port it over to Photoshop for the final render, I layer them on top of each other and add the dark strokes. So that what happens is you get this combined shape, which sort of creates an optical illusion and changes the whole look of the ship. This one, Astralis Shade, is one of the first ones that I did. It's part of another series. I think it's called the Skybound Skirmishers, but I return to this style every once in a while when I want to sort of mix things up and just see. I'll draw the main shape and then I'll draw the other one, and then I'll put them together and just see what happens, and I'll play around with the orientation until I'm happy with the results. And this was one of the first ones. Okay, so this design is pretty significant too, in that from November 19th, 2015, this is Infernal Rifle Bestie. So this design is the very first of the Brave Frontier designs that I did. And if you've never heard of Brave Frontier, it's a mobile RPG type game. The whole point of the game is squad building, and it's like a turn-based old school RPG with exploration and a whole story. And you basically summon these different anime chibi-ish looking units like this, and you create teams based around their skills, and you go through the story content. There's like a competitive arena. It's a pretty content-rich game, and it's been around for a couple years now at least. I started playing it probably early 2015, maybe even 2014. A coworker of mine introduced me to it. Down the road, I started thinking, well, I like the different characters and designs, but what if I tried drawing emblems for them? And up till now, I hadn't really drawn any, quote-unquote people, so I decided to start experimenting with the series and the characters and drawing emblems for them. And so this lady, her name is Bestie, which is a pretty funny name now that I think about it, given the times. But her deal is she's a sort of uniform soldier. She's got a hat and a coat and a pretty straightforward outfit, but she's got this massive sort of chain Gatling gun. And so when I was drawing her, I started with a pose base. So I don't think I've showed that in a video yet, but I have a master sheet of different male and female poses. When I do one of these, I'll grab the base and either use the pose or change it slightly and start creating the details, because this is meant to be like a silhouette emblem. And then I'll do that for the character and then their weapons, or sometimes they have summon creatures, and then I'll just add detail until it's done. And I think I've pulled several examples from this series since I've done a bunch of these. I sort of stopped, but I was doing one a week and posting them on the Brave Frontier subreddit. Some people may have found my work through that. It's something I'm probably going to get back to eventually. I've been working on them for so long, I'm just sort of taking a break for now. But the game is still going and I'm still playing it, so I will get back to them at some point. So this one from December 6th, 2015 is called the Grand Legion, and this one was an experiment in taking a simple single component and then creating an actual design out of it. I don't remember what inspired me to try this, but I had these little people that I'd used for a couple other projects, and I thought, what if I just used all the little people to create a giant person? I'm not the first one to think of something like this. I just started putting them together, forming the rough shape of this giant behemoth lumbering around, and then once I had the shape all put together, and I just added the heart here, one to give some color and also to break it up, and this was the end result. It's kind of weird, but at the same time I do like it, just in that if you look at it from really far away, it just looks like a big lumbering person, and then when you look at it up close, you realize it's made of individual people. This one is on our store. I actually put this design on a hoodie just because I wanted to see how it turned out. It's kind of a strange design, but it came out pretty clean. Like, I do not envy whoever had to silk screen that onto a garment, just because there's just a bazillion little things. But I don't know, it turned out pretty well. It's kind of a good example of just random experiments. Okay, so we're back to the Brave Frontier designs again. This one's from December 24th, 2015. This is Angelic Champion Nadore. And this design was one of my favorites. I think of the earlier ones that I did for Brave Frontier, this one got a pretty good reception, and it was one of the more complicated ones that I did. Basically, Nadore is this sort of angelic Valkyrie type lady. She's got a helmet, armor, and this sort of battle dress. Her weapon is this two-sided like double lance thing, and in game she has these glowing runic sigils around her lance. So when I was drawing it, I took the pose, and her overall design was pretty straightforward, but I said I really want to try and accurately recreate the sigil thing. So what I did was I went and I basically drew it from scratch in Rhino. I just got as close as I could by copying different circular shapes, and I drew the whole thing, and then when I ported this over to Photoshop to put all of it together, then I just flattened it and made it look like it was actually sitting on her lance. Overall, this is probably one of my favorite designs, even though it's one of the earlier ones. I feel like it doesn't get too busy, and everything just sort of kind of comes together nicely in the end. Okay, I think we're going to go through several of the Brave Frontier ones. I wanted to talk about these a little bit. This next one is from December 25th, 2015, and this one's Virtuous Champion Krantz. This is one of the male units, and he's sort of like an armored knight, and his weapon is this big sort of tasseled greatsword. This design is a good example of taking the base pose for the character, and then once I have the costume and then the weapon, just putting all the different things together, and then I added the energy around it for decoration. I will say one thing that I started to do later, I think it was, you can start to see it here where I made the weapons different color. This is one of the ones where I didn't do that. Later designs would differentiate the weapon, so it actually looks like they're holding it, and it's not all one color tone. But I do like the way this one turned out. It's pretty straightforward, not too busy, but gets the point across. This one from Brave Frontier, again, is from January 24th, 2016, so we've now gotten into 2016, and I think there was, 80 designs? We're definitely more than halfway through all this. These two are Claire and Colt, the twin siblings from Brave Frontier, and so I knew these two were relatively popular, so when I decided to do an emblem, I put them together. In-game, they're both these sort of armored knight-type characters, and Claire has like a pike lance, and Colt has a sword. So when I put them together, I basically just designed them separately, and then when I exported everything to Photoshop, I just layered them like you see here, and that's pretty much it. One thing I don't think I've mentioned for these, the color schemes for the characters is meant to match their elements, because all the characters in the game have an element: fire, water, etc. Colt is water element, and his sister is fire element, so that's why they're red and blue respectively. This one got a pretty good reception on the subreddit. I know these two were popular, so I think people enjoyed this particular one. Okay, so moving away from the Brave Frontier emblems, this one is from January 31st, 2016. This is not the first design that I ever posted from the Clans collab that I've been doing. Basically, this is where I've been taking these chibi characters that were designed by one of the artists in our studio, and just like for Brave Frontier, I'm creating more realistic proportioned emblems for them, sort of experiment with the design elements. This might have been one of the first ones I drew, but I put it in here just because I'd rather show an earlier one that I created versus when I posted some of the later ones, because the post order is different online, but that's okay. This one features two characters. This one's Sayo Bluetide and Kaya Crestwave. They're two characters from a race of beings called the Mizuchi, I believe. And I put them together because their abilities are they can manipulate water, and they basically function as a team. The guy, Sayo, is the one who summons, can control the actual properties of water, and his partner, Kaya, is the one who can actually change its shape and direct it as a weapon. And so I designed the emblems for all these characters as part of the collab. Each of the 11, I believe, races has their own unique emblem that I created. And then for the actual collab itself, I was basically given free reign to just take the chibi designs and just like give them the same treatment as I did for Brave Frontier. Basically, find a pose, experiment with the different design elements, and create these emblems for them. And I think I've pulled at least a couple as part of the collection. We're getting fairly close to current date, so we'll see what pops up. But this is one of the first ones that I did. Oh, there you go. So here's another one. This one is from February 1st, 2016. This is Tauraj Sakelon. I think that's how you say that. I didn't come up with the names for these. I basically just asked the artist, Tyvrid Kizuna, to give me all the information, and and then he gave me the concept art, and I basically ran with it from there. This guy, as you can see, he's got a sort of different themed outfit. This is like a sort of body armor he's wearing, and he has this painted cloth wrapped around his head. But his race, I think they're called the Yezod, which you can see in their emblem here. They have the ability to manipulate shadow, and they also are fond of these sort of sword-like blades. So basically all I knew was something with shadows, dark blue or purple color schemes. So then I just created this sort of spiky shadow projection here, and then I wanted to show off the weapons, which for the most part I just had free control over creating weapons to a point. So this one is sort of an example of the basic outfit, the shadows, and the weapons. It was pretty simple. Okay, so here we are at March 6, 2016. Going back to the Armada designs, this one's called Dimension Eater, and this one is a return to the single layer ship designs. And this one's a bit more complicated, but overall these things are meant to be looked at top down, pointing upwards. So this is the front of the ship right here. And not much to say about this one. I definitely think, as I've been doing these over the years, the consistency of the lines and making sure sections sort of line up instead of just being random shapes thrown together is something I've tried to do more and more with these, just to sort of create consistency in the different shapes. I know if you go and look back at some of the other ones, they're sort of just randomly put together and there's not much rhyme or reason, and so I've sort of tried to distill that a little bit, but still not get too strict with the drawing process. Okay, so this one is from March 11th, 2016, and this particular emblem should look familiar to most people that have been hooked into popular culture over the last 20, almost 30 plus years. This is the Xenomorph from the very famous Alien franchise. The Alien movies, at least Alien and Aliens. Aliens is probably my favorite of the series. They're very iconic movies to me. I've always really liked the Alien/Xenomorph's design. I remember, in fact, I still have a lot of the old Alien action figures from back in the day. If I ever get a chance to put them together in a display case, maybe I'll do a video on them, since I remember having a whole bunch of those when I was younger. I just love all the different design elements. Good old H.R. Giger, in all of his twisted glory, had done a good job in creating something that very, very deeply root itself in popular culture. I've always just really enjoyed it. So I think this was right around the time Alien Covenant was coming out, which I still haven't seen, but I thought, you know what, I haven't drawn a Xenomorph, so I'm gonna try that. And so this is the end result. Not much to say about it other than I chose this more hunched over pose so that I could show the tail curved up, just like you see in the movies. I did mention at some point, I think when I posted this, that I want to go and draw the Queen, so I'm going to definitely do that at some point in the future. The aliens are hopefully not going to go anywhere, but I know the reception to Covenant was kind of mixed, but I hope that they stick around, or at least get some work in Alien vs. Predator movies or something, because they're some of my favorite movie monsters for sure. Okay, we are still in March. This is from March 16th. This design from the Armada series is Drive Meteor. This one is pretty straightforward. One thing I wanted to point out on this one that you saw on the last one a couple designs ago, I mentioned the clean lines and sort of consistency in the shapes to make sure everything sort of looks organized. I started on some of these designs, I can't remember if it was this one specifically, but I started creating these sort of connection sections here in addition to the actual dividing connectors here, but these things, I just call them frames. I started doing that as part of these ship designs just because it was something new. I hadn't done them in a lot of other ones, and it's just something I started doing one day and I liked the result, so I've been incorporating that idea of these frame connectors on these mechanical type ships in not all of them, but a lot of the later Armada designs. I wish I could pinpoint exactly when that started, but right around this time it could have been when. Just sort of stuck with the series because it works pretty well for these type of designs. Okay, we are moving into May. This is May 3rd, 2016. This design is called Advance Praetorius. It's one of the Organics series. It's not from any particular franchise or any what I consider the random free drawing organic series. This was one of the entries, is kind of calling back to some of the older styles of symmetrical sections arrayed around a central point with shapes in between. To me, this looks sort of like almost like Space Invaders now that I look at it. I don't think that was what I was going for at the time, but the way the parts around the corners sort of look kind of remind me of the ships from Space Invaders. But I do like the combination of geometric and sharp edges. I think something like this would probably make a pretty neat logo or like a banner design. Okay, next up is another Brave Frontier design. I think this is one of the first of the dragons. The game does have its share of dragon characters that you can summon and put on your team. This one from May 9th, 2016 is Electrical Storm Eldora. And Eldora is this big, kind of Shenron-ish looking thunder dragon. And it's got all of these sharp horns and these spiky parts, and it just has these orbs of electricity that it sort of holds in its hand. I remember the unit being somewhat effective in the game, but I remember really just liking its design, so I decided to give it the same treatment as I did for the humanoid type units. I basically started by mapping out the primary shape, drawing the body, because it's mostly serpentine, and then adding the limbs, adding all the horns and spikes and everything, and then from there it was just pretty straightforward. I do like the way this one turned out in the end. It's somewhat busy, but not so busy that you can't really see a lot of the defining features. Okay, so this one is from May 15th, 2016, same day, a little later. This is going back to Monster Hunter. This is the circular emblem for the monster Mizutsune, which is one of the 4 flagship monsters in Monster Hunter Generations, which came out on 3DS in 2016, I believe. Because I did all 4 of the flagship monsters, which I can't remember if I've included them in the collection. There's basically 4 featured flagship monsters in that game, sort of special. And in the 4 days leading up to the release, I posted each of those 4 leading up to the release date. And so Mizutsune was one of them. And in-game, it's this Leviathan. It looks like a big bubble fox. It's got a long body and all this purple fur. And it slides around and sprays you with bubbles and then also shoots you at water. It's a pretty cool fight, and it's a really neat design. It's very colorful, and it's got a really cool theme too. Because it's got this long body, it ended up lending itself pretty well to the idea of a circular shape. I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out overall. Okay, so I think we're going to go through all 4 of them. So the second of the flagships from Monster Hunter Generations is Glavenus, which is a big brute wyvern, same type as Devil Joe. And Glavenus's deal is it's got this really long sword-like tail, and it can sharpen its tail in its mouth, and when it gets upset, it actually strikes its tail along the ground to make it red hot, and then it can use it as a burning weapon to slash at the enemy or throw fire. It's a very aggressive monster. Because I wanted to keep the circular shape, I made its tail a little bit longer than normal, but other than that, it was a matter of just putting the spikes along its body, because it's got these sort of ridges that come forward and go up, and then everything else is sort of leads down to its face. Glavenus is cool. It's one of my favorite of the 4 flagships. It's a tough fight. I don't know if we'll see this particular monster in World, but that would be neat. Well, maybe the other ones are somewhere else in the collection. This one from 6/27/2016. This design, Archdeus Viridax, which is a very strange name. I can't remember where it came from. But this is a standalone design that I created. I think I had gotten the idea from seeing like the demonic faces you see on like the backs of jackets or as flag designs. I really wanted to create something that was kind of similar, so I created this sort of demonic face with the flames around it. Single color scheme, but in the end, I like the way it turned out, and I put this one on the store as well. Overall, not much to say about it, but I just sort of like the end results. It seemed like all the design elements came together alright for this one. Okay, so it looks like the rest of the Monster Hunter flagships aren't in exact order, but this is the third of the four. The giant ice-dwelling Gammoth, which is like a giant woolly mammoth monster in Generations. Of the four flagships, this one is one encountered up in like the snow-covered mountains, and I really like Gammoth's design. It's very different from the dragon-like wyverns and all the other creatures that have been in the series so far. And when you fight this thing, it's massive. It's like the size of a friggin' house. And when you fight it, it lumbers towards you and then tries to smack you with its trunk and sprays you with ice. It's definitely a unique encounter compared to a lot of the other fights in Monster Hunter. It's a pretty well-designed creature. Enjoyed fighting it. It was definitely not a pushover either. I remember it being relatively challenging too. I did have somewhat of a challenge creating the quote-unquote circular emblem because its body is big but not necessarily long. So I took some liberties and it's vaguely circular, but I'm still counting it. Okay, so here's the fourth of the flagships. This one is from July 11th, 2016, and this is Astalos. This one's a flying wyvern and it's a thunder element. And this one's encountered up in the mountains initially. And this thing basically functions like a lot of the other wyvern types, and it's a highly aggressive, very, very fast moving creature. And it basically runs you down either on the ground or in the air, and it charges up its wings with electricity. And then as it charges up, it gains the ability to create these sort of shocking bursts around it. I would say Astalos is one of the more challenging of the four. I definitely enjoyed fighting it, and it has some really, really neat gear, but it was definitely not easy. Especially the hyper variant that you fight later. It's kind of a pain. But overall, really cool monster. It's kind of like a dragonfly wyvern, is what I think of it. So moving along, this one's from July 27th, 2016. This was one of the tower designs. I think this might be the only one that I put in the collection just because there's only a few. The tower designs are meant to be these vertical either symbols or organic type shapes, kind of like a totem pole almost. This one, the triform totem, is exactly that. I took 3 creature designs and I drew them vertically, since all the designs are sort of tall versus wide. No real specific idea here. I just said I'm going to create kind of a weird version of like a totem pole, and this is the end result. And I do like the different colors and the kind of different variety in shapes. Seems kind of otherworldly. I think it works pretty well. Okay, so here's another Brave Frontier design. We haven't seen a lot of the creature bosses from Brave Frontier. This might be one of 2 that I put in the collection. This one from August 6, 2016 is called Grudkia. As you can see from the in-game sprite, it's one of the monster bosses that you fight on raid mode. And based on the sprite, this one is kind of like a chimera-ish type creature. It's got these multi-headed bird-beaked heads down here. It's got multicolored limbs which reflect elements, I believe. And this thing, I honestly couldn't tell if this is connected. I think it is. It's like a giant tail with a dragon monster behind. It's a very busy design, but I like it. I think it looks really cool. It sort of reminds me of some of the bosses in Final Fantasy VI. I know when you fight it in game, this thing can be kind of annoying, but when I sat down to actually draw it for the Brave Frontier emblems, this one took a while because of how complex it is, but overall I like the end results. It's definitely unusual, but it was a fun one to work on, even though it was a lot of work. Okay, I was wondering when these would show up. So, in addition to Monster Hunter and Brave Frontier, I also do designs for Pokemon. I don't think I've talked about it a whole lot, but I have a pretty good history with the games. I've played the originals way back in the day. I've played them off and on in different series up till now. I still play a decent amount of Pokemon Go, so it was only natural to try and adapt the different monsters into emblem form. So this one from August 7th, 2016, this one's called Evolution of Rage. I wanted to feature the goofy yet iconic Magikarp, and then its awesome evolved form Gyarados. So when I decided to do this, I took what I know about creating the circular type designs and I just combined both. Fortunately, the Pokemon, even the big ones like Gyarados, are all composed of simple shapes. So converting that into emblem form is not difficult, but I wanted to try and stay as on model as possible. So the real challenge was replicating, all of the key details so that someone could easily recognize these Pokemon as what they are. I think this one turned out pretty well. I originally had planned to do these as shirts in our Redbubble store, but like I mentioned in one of the posts on our studio site, the Nintendo is pretty aggressive in enforcing copyright on these, so my initial designs got taken down rather than risk potentially getting, flagged by the store. I just don't post these on our Redbubble store at all, which is fine. I didn't do them specifically for that reason. I just have a lot of history with the series, so that's fine. Here's another one that I did roughly around the same time. I don't think I've talked about it at any point here on the channel, but my favorite Pokemon from Gen 1 is Scyther. I really like the idea of this insect-like reptilian praying mantis ninja. A very kind of unusual combination of design elements and traits, but ever since the original games, I've always been a huge fan of Scyther. I like its evolved form Caesar a lot too, but as far as the Gen 1 favorite, even though it's not one of the most competitive Pokemon, it's definitely Scyther. This was one of the first designs I'd originally put up, and I actually did manage to get this one put on a hoodie so that I could wear it, and shortly after, one of my other Pokemon designs got taken down, so I pulled this one from the store too. Scyther's one of my favorites. Definitely a classic from Gen 1. Here's the other one. So this was the actual design that got taken off of Redbubble. This one from 8/13/2016, of course, is Gengar. One of my other favorites, probably my second favorite after Scyther from Gen 1. I love Gengar. It's goofy, yet somewhat fierce looking, and it's kind of a troll, somewhat useful in combat. Overall, I just love its design. Because the regular Gengar's face is pretty unmistakable, I wanted to kind of switch it up a little bit, so I gave it this more menacing, sharp tooth grin and just the straight red eyes for the emblem. It's pretty recognizable. I think everyone who's played the old Pokemon games knows Gengar. I think it's pretty popular, but this was a fun one to do. Just another sort of bit of nostalgia. Okay, this one is from October 11th, 2016, and this one, Frostspire Hyuka, is one of the first of the Arachneos Weaver designs. This wasn't the first one to be posted, but this whole design series I've been working on off and on is kind of interesting in that they're meant to be these sort of spider demon creatures that have the main body of the spider is usually some sort of face, or meant to look like a face. From there, I usually build out the legs and add all the other details based around some sort of theme. So Hyuka here is meant to be ice themed, sort of corresponding with the different basic secondary elements. Usually I will start with a rough idea and just see what happens with these. I do like working on the different entries here or there as ideas sort of come and go, but this one stood out to me as one of the earlier ones that I've posted that I liked, so I included it here. This one, this series is still ongoing now, and I just sort of post new ones sporadically. I was wondering if this guy was going to show up. So this one from October 14th, 2016, another Pokemon design. This is the Alola form of Executor. Now, it was Pokemon Sun and Moon that came out that introduced the Alola forms, which is like the tropical evolutions for a lot of the old Gen 1 monsters. when I saw the early screenshots of Alola Executor, I knew that this thing was going to be like a meme fountain. The regular Executor, which is like a sort of bulky, goofy-looking palm tree, is great. I love Executor. But when I saw that its Alola evolution, which is like a dragon type, I believe, is this massive, like, palm tree dragon thing, I said I have to draw that at some point. It's just too good not to. And you might think, well, hey, that's kind of an exaggeration with that long neck, right? No, just Google it. Google Alola Executor. That is not an exaggeration. It has this giant telephone pole of a neck with the three goofy faces on top. I love everything about Alola Executor. It's hilarious to me. I haven't beaten Moon, and I when I eventually get back to it, I will make a point to get one of these and put it on my main team forever, because just look at its face. He loves it. So I pretty much had to do that design at some point, and I don't regret it. Next up, this one's from December 10th, 2016, so we're almost out of 2016 into 17. This is another entry in the Arachneos Weavers series. This might have been the second one I posted. This is Crushing Bolt Sercol, and this one, unlike the one before, is a bit more round as far as its theme. Again, these are all supposed to be spider demons, but they're not necessarily all shaped the same way. I tried to sort of mix up the central bodies so that they're not always just, a straight up face, and then when I put the legs on and add these sort of web things around them, I sort of play around with that a bit and just sort of see what forms. I'm not locked into a formula with these. Usually by the time it takes shape and I know kind of what element it's going to be, then I'll start paring down the design and narrowing down the different elements. But for this one, I knew it was going to be lightning themed. Compared to some of the other ones that I've done, now that I think about it, this one really isn't that complex, but its design works. I do like how the color scheme is pretty simple. It's not too in your face as far as the different colors. Okay, we've now officially entered into 2017. This is from January 10th, 2017. And this is another Brave Frontier raid boss. This is Balmedia. I think that's how you say it. And this boss is a sort of giant, fiery, elemental wolf creature. The game doesn't really give any sort of lore behind these things, because they're encountered on the raid mode as just targets that you go out and fight and kill. This thing looks pretty cool, as you can see from the in-game sprite. It's got these huge sort of spiky claws, this mane of golden fur, flaming tails. I can't tell how many tails it's got, and this, I don't know what that is, that sort of fan frame thing behind it. It looks like this big kind of divine beast, so I tried to capture that here in its pose. It ended up looking probably more wolf-like than anything else, but this one, kind of like the Grudkia emblem I showed several back, this one took a while to work on. It was definitely a challenge, but I'm pretty pleased with the way it turned out. I do like what I was doing online in the subreddit, because I mentioned that I posted these weekly. Every once in a while I would break up the regular units with these bosses, because for the regular units I was putting up polls and let people vote on which ones they wanted me to draw next, and every once in a while I would do a boss to sort of break things up. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll go back to that at some point. Okay, this one's from February 12th, 2017. Going back to the more basic shapes. This one is called Chaotic Saw. And this one, at first glance, is pretty simple. It's just a circular design. The outer blades are just a shape arrayed all the way around, 360. The inner shape I arrayed 360, but then I deleted half and then mirrored it. So while these go all the way around, this actually goes around this way, and it's mirrored this way, so it's more like teeth. And then I added the stuff in the middle. So I don't know if this really comes across in video, but this design, for whatever reason, creates a very strange optical illusion. If you just stare at it for a few seconds, you can sort of see this dark cloud or shadow that's sort of behind it, and I don't know what caused that. It could be the different circles and the sharp points, but it looks like there's this really faint dark shadow around it. And other people have noticed it as well, and that was not my intent when I made this thing, but it's kind of a neat side effect to the design. Again, it's an optical illusion, and when people pointed it out and I noticed it surprised me, but hey, that works. I'm not claiming to be some sort of artistic genius or anything. I just draw the images, and if cool stuff happens by accident, then hey, I'll count it. Okay, so this next one from March 12, 2017. This is one of the Blaster Master designs. I did, in case you haven't seen, I did a full Let's Play of the Nintendo game Blaster Master. Well, my personal favorite Nintendo game from back in the day. And for the title cards, I wanted to draw emblems for all the bosses. And so this one is called Mother Brain, and it's the first boss of the game. It's a giant sort of plant brain creature that has these orbiting brains around it that just sort of floats towards you and tries to mow you over. Lore-wise, I don't know why it's called Mother Brain. Everyone always thinks of, obviously, Metroid, but as far as I can tell, there's no real relation. And I think Metroid came out before Blaster Master, but that always struck me as strange because canonically this thing's called Mother Brain. But overall, the design is pretty simple. I basically drew the central brain parts, mirrored it, and then I drew little satellite brains and just used the array to copy them all the way around, and then that was pretty much it. Pretty simple, but kind of an iconic boss. I enjoyed playing through that game again. It was difficult, very, very difficult, but it was fun. Okay, so now we're getting pretty close to the end of the line here. This one from April 22nd, 2017. I believe I posted this on the subreddit 2 months ago. This is from Monster Hunter, and this monster's called Hujikiki. It's from the Japanese MMO Monster Hunter game Frontier. It's one that we didn't get in the West. It's Japan and I think Korea only. I don't play the game, but I am a big fan of a lot of the monsters in it, so every once in a while I'll do a circular emblem featuring those. Hujikiki, aside from having an amusing name, is a sort of like spiky wolf wyvern. It looks almost like a dog, but it's got these, it's covered in all these spikes, kind of like a bladed porcupine. It's got a really neat overall design to it. And so for this one, I decided to adapt that into circular form, since it's pretty easy to take similar shapes and then copy them around to make a circle. And other than that, it was just adding all the details, things like the wings, and this one was pretty straightforward. Now, Frontier, I don't think we'll ever get Frontier in the West, especially with World coming out soon, but I do like the variation and unique monsters that game has that you probably won't see. So I do like to mix those into the rotation every once in a while. Okay, so this one from June 16th, 2017 is another Brave Frontier emblem. This character is called Inception God Maxwell, and yes, this is technically a female goddess, even though her name is Maxwell. You actually run into this boss. She's initially a boss in the game, and you have to beat her in order to get her basic unit on your team. But later on in the game, they released a different version of her that you have to pass through. You have to beat a trial in order to get. They sort of changed her design a bit, and she's like this goddess of creation, essentially. And she has all of these things that are sort of orbiting around her, like that purple dragon. I don't know if it's a throne, that goldish thing behind her. It's like this big metal thing that just floats there. Her design is kind of complex, but at the same time somewhat simple. So when I decided to do this one, I said I'm going to do all the different parts separately and then I'll put it together at the end, because I always liked this particular character's design. Overall, pretty straightforward, but I definitely enjoyed trying to get all of the individual bits together in the end. I think it turned out alright. Okay, so that was the end of all of the images I had in the collection here. That took longer than I thought it was going to take to sort of talk through all those, but overall, I think since starting these, this began as just sort of a casual side project, these two-dimensional designs, as I was just experimenting around with Rhino, and over time, I think it's sort of become the bulk of the work that I do online, on YouTube and whatnot. Kind of an, I don't know, it's not a unique medium by any means. People do vector and tribal type designs all the time. I just try and make it a personal point to at least keep trying to learn new things or learn how to do things differently with the software, or I will pick up a new series and try and adapt into emblem form or whatnot. Overall, I do enjoy working on these a lot, making the speed drawing videos and trying to do things like the Monster Hunter designs are pretty fun. But hopefully this has been at least an interesting look at the process. Again, we covered 11 years, a sample of 11 years worth of work, so I realize these are going to be big videos to digest, and it's not my intent to just drone on and on, so the next time I come back for drawing commentary will be a more straightforward process of just doing a design start to finish. And other than that, the rest of the content will continue as normal. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.